Almost. All right, let's get started. How's everyone doing? Good. Come on, it's 2 o'clock. We just had lunch. You excited to be here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, we have had 3 to 4 that couldn't be here, because of medical reasons. But I think this is everyone supposed to be here, and we have 21 online. So, welcome again. Appreciate you guys coming in. Well, you have to because this is your class. So a little bit different today, as you can see. We have one guest speaker who is, logging in all the way from West Coast, California, actually. And then, we have the pleasure of filling in, of having Mr. Billgood again. And I think you remember him from our second week when he came and spoke. And, when Charles and Bill were, trying to put this topic together, Bill was generous to drive again and do this for us. So
thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. So, what we're going to cover today, is really our continuation. We have covered how to start a sustainable roofing business. You guys heard from Mr. Steve Little, Ms. Candace Klein, and then today you're going to hear from Mr. Charles on some of the follow-up of that as the communication, leadership, and some of those soft skills that you might need on how to sustain a roofing business. Just a reminder, we have our exam next week on Thursday. We'll talk about that at the end, but I'm going to give you some pointers on how to study for the exam. But before we do that, again, I have the pleasure of introducing one of the most influential persons I know in the roofing industry, that everyone knows who Mr. Charles is. I'll let him introduce himself, and you're going to hear some amazing stories from him. I mean, I'm just so excited for him to be here. He's gonna make you excited, I can tell you that. And then we have Mr. Billgood here, who's gonna be, doing this guest speaking with Charles, and they'll be talking about leadership and communication. So like we do, give them a big round of Clemson welcome, you guys.
And Bill makes me excited, so we're gonna let him start, and then he'll keep me telling the right stories.
Can you guys hear me? The key thing is I have the volume control, so I can get him off if I want. So you guys thought you were done with me, and Charles tells me a month ago, he said, I'm kind of busy, and it'll take me a day to get to Clemson, a day to get back, and a day to teach. So how about if we do me by Zoom and you show up in class and kind of help do the live part. So for me, it's a day to get here, a day to teach, and a day to get home, but I got nothing else to do. So it all worked out. The topic today, there's Charles and me to prove that we actually know each other. And there I am beating him at ping pong.
True.
And by the way, that's Antis Roofing office. So when we talk about culture today, this is not your typical grandfather's roofing company, the way that he's got his office set up. Whiteboards everywhere, drawings all over the walls, ping pong table out in the middle of the space. A little bit different kind of culture that he's built there than you're used to seeing, but I'll let him talk about that. So we're going to talk about really 3 topics that I'm going to argue come together, and the topics are leadership, culture, and communications. And I'm going to suggest you can't have one without the other 2, or you can, but it's not going to be nearly as effective. So I want to start with leadership because we're going to segue into Charles here in a minute. But before I do that, what do you guys think of when you think of leadership? What does it mean?
Having a value.
Having good values. Yeah, that's a great example. And we're seeing it today right in Ukraine. We're seeing a difference in leadership style, to put it mildly, between Ukraine and Russia. Yes? Yep, exactly. Anybody else?
When your actions inspire others to do better.
When you inspire others to do better. Somebody's been looking at my PowerPoint. Yes.
Not really
Wow, you've been looking at my PowerPoint too. That's, those are really great answers. So how about that? That's kind of a classic definition of being a leader, being able to inspire others to achieve a common goal. Now, you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do it the way Putin does, which is probably not the best way to, if you're running a business. You can do it the way Zelensky does, which is a lot more powerful, right? Being inspirational rather than forcing somebody to do something. Or how about this one? And that's almost what she said. Empowering other people is a big part of being a leader, right? Empowering other people to be leaders is a really big part of leadership. So how do you do that? There are lots of ways to achieve that, and this is a perfect time for me to introduce Charles. Charles Antis is a roofing contractor in Irvine, California. Started his business 30 years ago by himself, and I will let him tell that story of how he started the business and how he thinks about his business in terms of leadership, culture, and communication. So,
Okay.
Charles, go ahead.
I like it. I like that intro. I'm going to go back a tiny bit further and tell you how I got into roofing because yes, I started it myself. I'm not a second, third generation, but I grew up in Oregon where everybody I knew worked with their hands. Like they were loggers in the woods if they were the roughest and toughest, or they worked in the plywood mills. And that's where my father worked. And I valued men valued other men's labor. People appreciated the hard work that was done and sometimes the loss of life. And so that's all I thought of work was until I was going to college and I got recruited to go to Southern California to sell. Because I had experience, they thought that would help me sell and I was going to knock on doors. And so I came down when I was 21 to Southern California for the first time from Oregon with this vast experience of being a laborer because that's how we saw ourselves and we needed all this work done. But then I come down and I'm selling and I'm knocking on doors and I'm selling insulation. And it's the summer of '84. I knock on this family's door to sell them home insulation and they answer the door and I got on with this family so well. It was a deaf family, meaning they couldn't hear very well. The parents couldn't. And so I was learning to sign that day. I really loved this family. You know how when you interact with people or when you sell, you want to love them. And I love this family. And the next day I went back in the summer of '84 on the porch of that house to pick up a check. And I was probably going to make $800 on the deal, which was pretty good back then. And so I knocked on the door and nobody answered. That wasn't a big deal. You know, they're deaf. They didn't hear. And I knock on the door again and nobody answers. This time I look through the glass and I see the guy, the father, looking at me and he's not coming to the door. Instead, he's on this little typewriter phone machine. And next thing I know, I hear footsteps coming on the porch and I'm, well, what's this? And this lady's looking at me, this small lady's looking at me and she's pointing, get out of here. And I said, but why? She said, because you're ripping off and taking advantage of my handicapped neighbors. And I said, no, I'm just giving them insulation. And she goes, no. And she pulled out the contract and she showed me where the company promised her how much it could save them. And she sat down and sold me on the fact that it was impossible for them to get that savings. And I realized she was right. And this person that I thought was bad, that was out to get me, was actually the protector of this family and keeping them from something that wasn't going to serve them. And in this story where I'm starting my talk today, I wasn't the hero. And I thought, my God, I don't want that to ever happen again. And I quit my job that day. So here I am in Southern California, and it's scary. I got to tell you, it's scary there for me. It's a big city and I'm not used to it. And I just looked for a job. And I couldn't say I was a salesman. I didn't see myself that way. I couldn't say I could even serve in a restaurant. I was a laborer. So I looked for a job and the only job I could see was in roofing. And so I took that job. It was the hardest job I'd ever had. And I was a laborer and growing up working in the woods is not easy, but this was a really hard job. But I discovered something that if I worked hard, I felt good about myself. And I became good at what I was doing. And particularly one area, I became really good at solving leaks. And the way that turned out was one day, this guy I was working for, there was a leak on a home and I went out there to fix it. And he told me what to do. And I was so proud of the fact that I fixed this leak. And when everybody went back up on the roof afterwards, including the owner of this company that had worked for about a year, And I said, yeah, I got the leak. And then the leak was on this coping metal. And this coping metal was sloping down. And so when I fixed the leak, I pulled off the coping metal, I sealed, I put new membrane down, and then I put the coping metal down, and I put the top piece on first. I put the bottom piece on second. And so when we went up on the roof, Tim says, that's going to leak again. I go, why? He goes, because it's bucking water. What's bucking water? And he said, what's overlapping above? What's above is not overlapping what's below. And I learned the basic principle of roofing right there. Everything above must overlap or flash everything below. I mean, with that alone, you can solve any leak, I learned. And that's when I started to love leaks. I decided in that moment, I will never be humiliated again. And I became the very best at solving leaks. And so I started my company a couple of years later, because that company didn't have enough work. I told people this: give me the leak that no one else can solve, and I'll fix it for free. And I got just enough work to get by. And that's how I got started in the roofing in the summer of '84. But I got to tell you what happened right after. Within a year of starting my company, I get a call, and a woman's got leaks in every room. And so I'm like, yeah, woo, I'm driving out there. This is good. I'm going to make money. There's lots of leaks there. But as I get closer to where the home's going to be, it's fairly near Los Angeles Airport, I noticed the homes are getting smaller, and I started seeing graffiti. Until finally I turn on the street where the home's going to be, and I just see like this dead grass. I don't even see a home until I pull forward enough to get past this big house next to it. I just see this small 4-wall home with a simple roof. I can't see it yet because it's flat, and I just go up there and knock. And because, you know, you show up. Dad taught me you always show up no matter what. So I knock on this door, and then 3 things happen that I don't think I'd be here talking this class if this story hadn't occurred to me back in that about 1985, or this is actually about 1989 when I started my business. And so about 1989, these 3 things happened. I knocked on the door, and then a woman answers the door, but I can't say anything yet because she's got this look on her face like, oh, like I'm exhausted. I've had a bad month. And so I'm about to say something, and then the second impression hits me. It's this wave of mildew. It's this stench of mildew, so much that I feel like I can't breathe. And I don't know if it affects you that way, but mildew makes it so I can't breathe. So I start to pull back. Now I'm thinking, what am I going to say as I'm going to leave? I'm leaving this. It's fight or flight in my mind for some reason. But at that exact moment, as I'm turning to leave, still wondering what I'm going to say, I feel a tug at my finger. And that's when I look down, and in contrast to this mom and me, I see this 6-year-old girl, looks like her mom, except she's got a smile, an ear-to-ear smile, just because she's got a visitor in her home. And as she pulled me in, I doubted she had a lot of visitors before, because she pulls me to this crowded living room and through like a crooked, undersized hallway. And then she turns right into this room. And I knew it was her room because she immediately smiled and pointed to a My Little Pony poster on the wall. But that was the exact moment I looked down at her feet, and I saw 4 mattresses with moldy bedding. And I was like this. I was froze because I didn't know what to do. I mean, there's no way I can give something away, but there's no way this family has a dime. And this is a threat. I feel like I have to leave, but this little girl's smiling at me, and it was like this tussle going on in my head. And I'm thinking, well, I can't do anything. And then the mom walks back in the room with that same frown, and something happened when I looked at that, from that little girl's smile to the mom's frown again. Something came out of me. It's like all of a sudden in that moment, this is a big deal, and I want to capture this moment. I said, maybe I can do something. There was a mechanism in my head that suddenly didn't say no. Somehow the frown on the mom's face gave in me this, maybe I can do something. And I thought I was going to be able to go up there and patch that roof. But that maybe, I said, I'm going to take care of your roof, thinking maybe they had a patch. But I walked up on the roof, and it was gone. I could see plywood. They needed a whole new roof. And that maybe, I went to bed at night, and I was able to figure out how to get volunteers and get material cheap. You know what? By the weekend, we had 6 volunteers, and we showed up. One of the siblings even helped out because there was 5 other siblings. And we gave that family a safe, dry roof, and they stayed in their home. And look what happened there. Now I got to say, I didn't pause on it yet. I wasn't proud of it. It was like an embarrassment story. I thought I'm not going to survive in my company if I do this, but I did feel good about that family. But what happened is over time, I kept running into those siblings. I kept running into those 6 volunteers. And every time I've seen them, and I haven't seen any of those people in probably the last 10 years, but anytime for those next 20 years, when I ran into one of those siblings or one of those volunteers, man, it was like a boom, high five. Hey, how you doing, brother? Hugs with people that don't always hug. And I go, what is this? Well, today, that's what it feels like when you go next door to the studio to Antis Roofing. That's what it feels like when you're playing ping pong or you walk by the place where other people dream of doing it better. It's culture. It's brand. It's inside out. And we're going to talk about that today. I want to tell you quickly before I give it back to Bill what happened. I was struck with a condition when I started my company. We became very good at solving leaks, and that's what we mostly sold in the beginning. But we were struck with a condition. We just couldn't let somebody have a leaky roof just because he didn't have the money to pay. And I wasn't proud of it, but after a while, I knew that we could always, let's go patch it. And I got to tell you, every time an ask comes in to this day, and we get a lot of asks because we talk about this, I laugh about it with my upper management. It's like, oh no, what are they asking? But something happens if we can say, maybe we can. And that's what happened not long, maybe 10 years after we donated that first roof, 15 years, Habitat for Humanity came and they said, will you donate a roof? Well, that was easy for me to say, yeah, because these are families that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a home, but they get a little help and then they're able to buy and finance their own home. And when you look at the families that go through the Habitat program, the typical family goes from like a 23% likelihood of furthering their education after high school to 76% likely to further their education after high school if they are housed in a home that gives them 4 safe walls and places to study. And so we were able to start to donate the Habitat roof. And then the CEO came back, well, you donate another roof? We said, sure. And since that first roof, and that was, I think it was 13 years ago, since we donated that first roof, we've donated every roof on Orange County Habitat for Humanity. I think right now we're just roofing our 93rd home. It's almost 1.5 million in roofing. Eagle Tile has donated every tile on that roof. And by the way, that's something I've discovered is manufacturers are really generous. It's actually easier for them to make a big donation than is the cost of labor sometimes. But what we find is the more we give, the more we grow in how we see ourselves, the more we prepare ourselves to manage people better, to see ourselves higher. And the other thing about when you really start doing this, like I said earlier, you become heard inside and outside your company. And we'll talk more about why this is. But the one thing that I want you guys to really listen to today is if you want to be heard in the world, if you want to sleep better at night as you grow, and if you want to be heard inside and outside your company, then you need to show some vulnerability. And the vulnerability looks something like the stories that you're going to hear today. They don't have to be like my stories, but something that tells who you really are and what really matters to you, because people don't only look at that tag Clemson to align with you and trust you. They do. That matters a lot, but it also matters on the causes that you're affiliated with. And we all have causes. We just have to pause and ask ourselves what they are. So I'm going to pass it back to Bill and we're going to move on. But thank you, Bill, I want to just thank Bill. Bill is the most amazing person. We'll talk about some of the things he's done today, but he is a big visionary who thinks in terms of maybe we can do great things together. And that's why he's here today. Otherwise, I would have had a hard time being here. So again, thank you, Bill Good, for coming. You're awesome. I love creating with you.
And purpose. That work? I mean,
while you're fixing that, Bill, I might say that sometimes I get excited when I'm telling stories. And Bill and I discussed this before. We love questions. So if we're right on something that you're going, oh, if you have that moment, shout it out. Because by the way, talking in classes like this with people like Bill, sometimes we innovate. We actually come up with something better because the world is changing so fast. So if you bring the right question today, we might see it better than it's ever been seen. So I want to empower you to use your voice today as we talk.
And I'll use my voice now that everybody can hear it, including Charles. I was about to say, I have seen employees of Charles's go to tears when they talk about working for his company, because he has built that brand, he's built that culture, and his turnover rate, Charles, your turnover rate is like
last we measured it was we had a 92% retention rate.
In an industry that's probably half of that on average nationally. I mean, that's what this does. That's how you build a company based on brand and culture, and that's exactly what Charles has done. We'll talk more about this later. That's a Ronald McDonald House camp in Northern California, or in Southern California, north of Los Angeles, that we had did a lot of work on. So we'll talk more about that one. But I want to talk a little bit about culture and how that impacts leadership. As you heard Charles talk about, brand matters, culture matters, purpose matters. But here's the catch, I think. That's easy to say. And every company talks about that today. Every company today has a corporate social responsibility department. And they talk about how they give back to their communities, and they talk about how they do all these wonderful things for their employees. But yet, Charles has 92% retention rate, and most roofing companies have 50 or 60% retention rate. So the question is, and the example here is, I fly United Airlines a lot. I've flown over 2 million miles on United Airlines, and every time I get on the airplane, they talk about how you're in the friendly skies now. So you're not. There's nothing friendly about those skies. The day that I went over 2 million miles, I was flying from San Francisco to Newark to change planes to get to Charleston. There's no direct way to get from San Francisco to Charleston. And I get on the airplane in San Francisco, and the captain comes on and announces that we have a new 2 million mile flyer with us, and people on the airplane applaud. And then 10 minutes later, the captain comes on to say, we're having mechanical problems. We're not going to be leaving on time. So, so much for all of that. I get to Newark, miss my connection. I'm sitting in the Newark airport, and I have like now 4 hours to kill. So I decide I'll go to the United Club because maybe they'll take me in. I'm not a member. And I walk up to the United Club, and I say, your plane was late. You had mechanical problems. This is my 2 million mile day. Can you let me come in and just sit until my plane leaves? Nope, can't do that. We're not related. This is what he said. We're not related to United Airlines. It's got the same logo. It says United Club, but no, that doesn't work. So then the question is, if you're United Airlines, or if you're any company, and you believe that you have brand culture working for you, and you believe that you're a leader who wants to do that, how do you make sure that your customers are satisfied? How does that all translate into the bottom line? How can you take this brand and culture that Charles has developed and make sure that you're making money and make sure that your customers are satisfied, right? That's the challenge. It's easy to do good. It's easy to build that culture. Not easy to build that culture, but you can build a culture. But how does that fit in with running a successful business? And with that, Charles, I'll turn it back to you to answer.
Okay, you caught me taking a shot of the stage right here. All these lights they have. This is so great. You know, I'm really lucky that Brian next door makes this available. If I was doing this in my conference room, the audio wouldn't be near as good. So thanks, Brian. So I'm going to talk about where I left off. You know, I couldn't let anybody have a leaky roof just because they didn't have the money to pay, but I didn't necessarily tell the story yet. I wasn't talking about it out loud yet. It felt like I shouldn't talk about it out loud. it felt like it was wrong to, I'm from that generation where we really grew up with a heavy belief in a judging God theory or punishing God theory. I don't think you guys hold it that way, but like I was always ready for God to strike me with lightning, and prove that I'm bad or something, the way I grew up. I don't hold it that way anymore. And so I don't know, it's like I couldn't talk about the good we were doing because it felt like it was wrong. And a couple things happened. One thing was I was lonely. I was up there leading, we're giving away roofs, but people in the company, they're not necessarily understanding it or doing it, but I'm not telling them, I didn't tell them that story I told you yet. And so, and this is the way Bill and I spoke together at the Citadel. I remember that, just remembered right now. And I told this story. This is what it reminded me of. You guys seen the movie Old School with Will Ferrell? And he's at that party in the beginning and he's like, Snoop, Snoop, Snoop. And he's streaking down the street and he thinks he's got a big crowd with him and he's all alone. And finally his wife comes up and goes, honey, get in the car. And she's like, honey, I'm streaking. Everybody's doing it. Come on. It's like, that's kind of what it felt like. I was so isolated when I didn't tell why and what was going on. And eventually I told that story and people started to understand, but it wasn't enough. This is what I had to do. And this is how it really needs to be for good culture and communication. People need to know my story. And that helped a lot when I told them why. It really helped sell the why we're giving the Habitat roofs. But I also need to know their story. I need to know about my director of finance. I need to know about her, like Audrey, my CFO. I need to know what causes fulfill her. Like, what if it doesn't fulfill her doing Habitat builds? And, honestly, she's done a Habitat build with me one year. She didn't do it the next year. But right now, Audrey just became a board member for local chapters of Boys and Girls Club of Central Coast. I got to tell you why that's important and how I got there. When everybody starts to feel fulfilled and they see how their stories get together, then you start to have real culture. I'm going to show you a tool, just as an example, that how we do that. What we do is we give out gift cards. Now, you've received gift cards before. Gift cards are usually restricted to be spent at the store they're purchased at, like Target gift cards there, or it could be American Express. You could use most anywhere. But this is a particular gift card that we started handing out a few years ago. We've handed out 10,000 of them now, and they're called giving cards. The difference between a gift card and a giving card is a giving card can only be redeemed at a 501c3 nonprofit. That means you can only give it to something like Habitat for Humanity, Ronald McDonald House, United Way. You could give it probably to the Roofing Alliance, which is awesome, as long as it's 501c3. And the reason that's important is this: when you give that to the people and then you ask them to come back and report to the group who they gave it to and why, then you start to hear what fulfills them. And this is a really critical piece for your development, whether you're doing it at a company or not. And I want you to hear this part. When you express the cause that fulfills you and why you give to it, it builds a massive amount of trust. And so it would look like this: somebody in accounting who nobody likes because they're kind of, they're one of these money people. They're not really smiley, and they're all of a sudden, and this doesn't exist at Answers Roofing. I'm making this person up, but this person in accounting that nobody likes, all of a sudden she shares one year. I gave my $25 giving card to Ronald McDonald House. And the reason I did is because I had a niece who almost died and the house kept us close so we could help her heal. When everybody hears that story, it's the coolest thing that happens. I've had it happen to me. I got goosebumps telling it's not even a real story. But I've had it happen where all of a sudden this person I didn't like for whatever reason, suddenly I get her. Oh my God, I get why she's built that way. I get it. Her story helps me trust her. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm feeling this thing like I love her. And that's what you really need today if you want to build culture. Well, I want to tell you how it shows up. It matters with the employees, but I got to tell you, when you're doing this, it also matters in how you're received in the world. Two things happened 2 weeks ago, and I got to tell you this story. There's two parts to it. The first was I got an email from the new CEO of the NRCA, McKay Daniels. I think he takes over in April or May. And McKay Daniels said, Charles, I'm writing this letter to the general in my first address to the members. And this letter, I'm going to talk about corporate social responsibility. That is this function of a business to give back in a big way to the community, and why I'm talking about it is important. And he goes, I'm writing this letter because people won't talk about it because it feels wrong. It feels braggadocio, but I want to be able to show them if you don't talk about it, how's it going to grow? So I'm going to tell him this story. And he goes, I'm going to tell him this stat. I'm going to say this, and this is a true stat that he's going to quote in this next letter. And the stat was something like this. When the consumer knows that you're expert at what you do, like a roofing company, you're 26% more likely to get that job from the competition. That makes sense. Like, okay, all things considered, they know we're super competent. We're on the top of the list. We're 26% more likely. This is the counterintuitive thought that he introduces in the letter. He goes, this is counterintuitive, but when the consumer believes that you are generous in the community and your stories that you talk about are ring with authenticity, then they're 78% more likely to choose you. I mean, it's a game shifter. And so he told me, he asked me if he can quote me. And then right when that's occurring, I walk into a Zoom meeting, which is our Antis Roofing all hands on deck meeting. And in that meeting, at the very end, we ask the question that we ask at that meeting every time: is there anything positively or negatively affecting our brand that we want to bring up? And this time, Devin raised his hand. He's our head of sales. And Devin raised his hand and says, I have something that happened that was kind of negative, but you'll see it's positive. And he said he was in a board meeting the night before. And a board meeting means we sell to homeowners associations. So there'll be a group of 5 elected homeowners that make a decision for all 500 units. So Devin was in an electronic meeting on Zoom. And in that board meeting, there's 5 board members that were lit up video on the screen. And then they had the general population only audio, the other members who live there, homeowners that live there. In that meeting, Devin started talking, and then he was interrupted by the treasurer. And the treasurer started complaining about my company. And the treasurer said, Antis Roofing, that's not a good company. We don't like you guys. You overcharge us. And you do it because you have that suite at the Honda Center where you're drinking all the time. He said something like that. Now, Devin knows what he's talking about. He's talking about the suite that we have and the 20,000 tickets we give away to nonprofits, people who couldn't otherwise go to a professional hockey game during the year. And so Devin started trying to explain that, but the guy was interrupting him. Suddenly, there was a voice from the anonymous members of the homeowners that lived there. And this person said, I want to talk. And she actually shouted down Devin. She goes, I want to talk. And I got to tell you, she goes, I got to tell you, I know Antis Roofing, and I know what they do with that foundation. And there's over 100 nonprofits that get to go to games that couldn't otherwise go. And then the guy that had started this said, you have no right to talk. You need to be silenced. You're not on the board. And she goes, I will not be silenced. And she kept talking. When she was done, he let her. Every other board member voiced an opinion positive Antis Roofing, and every contract was signed. That's the story now that McKay Daniels is going to put in the next communication to the boards. So he told me. Now with press, those things don't always happen the way we're planned, but I expect it to be there because it's a story that shows why this matters so important. It matters in your culture. People believe and they sleep better at night. And gosh, you know what it means to my people when they look at the logo that says, keeping families safe and dry, and they believe that that means something, and they believe that what we're doing and what we're experimenting with here in California, Bill's going to share over in Florida or in Chicago or wherever he's at in South Carolina, and we're going to emulate. When my people know that what they're doing is changing the world, then they are fulfilled. And when my clients and all of our stakeholders, and there's lots of stakeholders, there's a supply chain, Bill's part of my stakeholders, we're leaders in the roofing industry. We have, if all of your stakeholders believe, it gives you momentum, it gives you leverage, and not in any way of anything that distresses you out, but it gives you a happy leverage. There's in a world that's changing, you almost need a happy chaos. Chaos is really shitty if you have somebody toxic in the room. Throw out the toxic guy and let the chaos create the first veins to change. I'm going to stop right there and before I go down the wrong wormhole.
Oh, you're doing great. That's inspirational, right? The way that he talks about what he's done with his company. Let's pause and take questions. You guys have any questions for Charles? Yeah.
I don't know if you can answer this later, but when did he decide to make the switch from leak patching to actual roof?
So the question is, when did you decide to make the switch from just being the leak guy to having an actual roofing company, and how did that happen?
Okay, well, that's a fair question. I guess I have to explain that a little. When I started my company, the company I worked for didn't have enough work. And so I didn't start my company with any sort of a business plan. It was a desperate plan. And I just saw this one thing that the world needed where I live, that, oh my God, I'm really good at leaks. And so it wasn't, and then I got to tell you the other part, re-roofing required things I had never seen. A lot of the bigger types of re-roofing I hadn't had experience with yet, so I was afraid of it. It felt like it could sink me, and also I had no ability to bid on those jobs. I didn't have kettles and crews. I was myself and maybe one employee for the first year or so, what happened is we started to grow. Now, I've always been a proponent for maintenance and repair. In fact, Bill will tell you that our landfills in the US are roughly, I think, 25% filled with roofing product. And a lot of that roofing product goes premature. And so there's a lot of reasons why it's good to get all the usable life out of a roof. But in the beginning, it was my only thing that I saw that I could sell. I did not have capacity in my mind, the ability to float any kind of a good job. And so some of the first jobs, I went through some real rocky areas in the start of my company. Some of the first re-roofs I did weren't my best. There were some that I had to peel off and do again. Those are great stories because they built character, but I learned the hard way. And after I got into this for a few years, I learned something though. And this is good to know if you guys enter the roofing industry, man, your margin's all about repair and maintenance. There's where your money is, but your big sales are in re-roofing. But what happens on the West Coast here is a lot of people lose money on their re-roofing, especially if you factor in the risk that they are associated with that tiny margin. You do a 500 unit complex on a re-roof and you're only making 5 points. So you don't have the points that protect you against bogus California litigation. So you almost have to put away more money and build that out. So it takes a while. So for me, it took a while to become sophisticated enough to be able to bid on any type of roofing system. But I also have right now a very sober sense of it's a bad idea to chase big jobs. You know, and it's one of the things I say to my team, and I'm not saying it's always heard, but I say to my team, and I'd like to build this into the algorithms better, is I'd rather sell $100,000 maintenance job than $1 million re-roof. And that's a pretty awesome comparison. And the reason is the re-roofing jobs are laden with risk to your company. Imagine, some re-roofing jobs, all of the crawling around we have to do being tied off on a re-roof. And imagine if you're not safe, what could happen? And then you look at product liability in California, 10 years, you have a leak on that building. They say it's the roof. Usually it's not. But if you don't go defend it, your insurance company's writing a check that could eventually be so there's a tremendous investment in chasing to protect yourself in my state. And I'm not even complaining. It is what it is. It doesn't serve me it is what it is. But so I try to get ahead of it. One of the reasons CSR serves us so well is it allows us to balance things out. It allows us to have a holistic discussion on what's good for a community. I think one of the pushes Antis Roofing is going to do in our marketing is going to be pushing away from re-roofing as much as people do it, to try to get those last few years with a sense of how this affects the whole global scale of things. I kind of went on a lot of topics there, but I wanted to tie it a little bit back into CSR.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say a little bit of it is organic. It just kind of happened. A lot of it, I think, a lot of the way that his company grew was because of the brand that he was establishing even then, where, you asked me, I've heard Charles to say, I don't say no. I never say no. Somebody asks me for something, the worst I'll do is say maybe. And we'll see if I can solve it. So that gets out. People begin to recognize it. I think the other really important thing he said earlier is in order for people to know about you, you got to talk about it. There's so many roofing companies, in my experience, that do good. They do good all the time. They're giving back to the communities. They're doing things like Charles does, smaller scale maybe, but they're doing them. But they think it's just part of what I'm supposed to do. And in a way it is, right? They're part of the community. They want to give back to the community. But if nobody ever does it, a couple things happen. One, the company doesn't benefit from it. And the other is other companies don't see what they're doing, who might be inspired to do the same kind of thing. So if you're going to do good, I think Charles would tell you, you got to talk about doing good to encourage other people to do good too. And we see that happen all the time.
There's a way,
And
I'll just put one caveat on that. There's a way I've learned to hold it because it's hard to hold it. Sometimes you feel like you're bragging, but at the end of the day, I hold it like this. I'm going to share the most accurate depiction of what we're trying to do here with our intention, true to our intention, and how it turned out in an honest depiction. And if I do that, then what I'm doing is I'm showing people in Florida and Chicago and New York how we're doing it, which is making it better. So the intent is to open my kimono and say, this is everything. This is what we're trying to do. Let's do it together. And if you hold it like that, it ends up being accepted like that. And you're allowed to be able to talk about it. That's my mechanism.
so if you couldn't all see, that's part of his branding. The inside of his jackets all have either the Antis logo or the NRCA logo or the Roofing Alliance logo. And I don't know what else you got. Ronald McDonald House, maybe.
This is the
community care.
200,000. This is the 200,000. I'm sorry, 20,000 seats. I added a zero. 20,000 seats we give away every year in the Antis Roofing Ducks Community Corner. Those are the giving cards.
The giving cards that he talked about. And to move forward, give back. I love that. All right, the other piece we want to talk about here is how communication ties into all this and how communication becomes a part of leadership. And I think you've heard a little bit of that already. I wanted to share with you, and I can't remember when I taught here a month ago if I told you this story, but it's a true story. 15 years ago, we were trying to figure out how buying decisions are made in the roofing industry. They're complicated. You have typically a building owner that you've got to talk to who's going to make a final decision. They can be influenced by a roof consultant. There are a lot of roof consultants out there in the universe now that are selling themselves to building owners with the idea that they'll draw the specification for the new roof. They'll interview the contractors, take bids from the contractors. Owner, Mr. Owner, you don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to take a percentage of the contract as my fee. So they're out there selling their services. Virtually every manufacturer is trying to influence a buying decision on a big job. They have salespeople who are calling routinely on building owners, especially multi-building national owners, Walmart, Target, those kind of folks. You have distribution, controlling, delivering material to the job site. And a lot of times they will have an excess of inventory of a certain product that they're happy to sell at a lower price. So you have all these dynamics going on. So we were trying to get a better understanding as to what are the things that are most important to a building owner when they make that buying decision, when they're deciding what contractor to use. At the end of the day, what's the biggest things on their list. So you should be able to figure this out, but you want to guess what was number one on the list? Communication. And here's my favorite story from that. One of the building owners said, we had no problem with your bid. We had no problem with this is to a contractor. We had no problem with the bid. We had no problem with the price. We had no problem with the work that you wound up doing. But here's what happened. We had a day when we were expecting you to show up to do the roof work, and it was going to be tear off, and we knew that there was going to be staging involved. So we cleared out the company parking lot, and we had all of our employees park somewhere else because we're expecting to see you show up with cranes and hoists and all the equipment that you need to do it. And nobody showed up, and nobody called. And finally, we had to call your office, and the answer we got was, well, yeah, it was too windy for us today, which is, by the way, is legitimate, but it was too windy for us today, so we're going to be there tomorrow. They said, nobody called. Nobody told us that was going to happen. And so that, we heard that story a number of times. And so when we got done with this study, that was the number one reason for selecting a contractor. We want to make sure that there's going to be an appropriate chain of communication. We want to know who it is that we need to talk to if one of these things kind of happens, if nobody shows up. Do we have to call the home office and go through a receptionist and wait for the salesman who's out selling other jobs to return a phone call, that kind of thing. And then you go down the list of other factors after that, and you get into things like the reputation of the company, the value of the bid, price by price came in, I think, number 5 or number 6, kind of what you would expect. But it was surprising to me and to, I think, a lot of contractors. And a lot of contractors, by the way, still don't believe it. They say, well, yeah, that may be the people you talk to, but my customers, it's all about price. But it's not. And there's study after study after study that says price is a factor for sure, but it's not always the determining factor. And the consultant concluded that she called it an egocentric bias, which means in academic world, I guess, means the customer believes that they're getting the best value with the contractor that they choose. Not the best price, but the best value. And there's a big difference there. But again, communication is the best. All right, so before we get there, so Charles, you want to talk a little bit about why communication matters?
Yes.
And you before you do, Charles spends an awful lot of time out in the community, talking to community leaders, talking to philanthropic leaders, talking to the foundation community, the 501c3 community, and he spends an awful lot of time talking to his employees. These all hands on deck meetings that he has, not counting the informal conversations that he has with his team all the time. So talk, if you would, Charles, about why you do that, why that matters, and how it fits into your business model.
Well, I guess I could start by saying I've always been doing personality assessments later in life. I understand that I'm just that person that needs to be at the center of attention. But I didn't understand that before, and I thought that I had to say so much to say, and I would just vomit on people. I didn't mean to, but I'd tell you all my worries. That's not a good thing to tell your team or your tribe or whoever you're speaking to. Or I'd tell them, or I'd tell too many stories or tell the wrong emphasis of a story. And, I didn't understand the dynamic that happens inside people's. And I'm going to get to what I've understand today. But today I communicate all the time because I know I can make a difference. Today I communicate as much as possible because I understand the mechanism that lets your body change and let you see yourself higher and forever look at the world differently. I understand how to create. I understand that. And we'll talk to it in a second. But I do it because I'm fulfilled doing this. If I can speak to my team and they hear me, as opposed to me going up there and telling what I'm worried about, and they just make them more worried. I mean, I want to do that again. If I can go out in the community like I am right now, speaking to you guys and make a difference, and all of us walk away seeing the world a little bit better, then that's what I want to do. If I can go show up at the City of Irvine PR meeting this morning and hear my county supervisor talk about stuff that we're doing together in the community, then I'm going to do that. And I'm probably in that moment going to, which I did this morning, find a reason to pay him a compliment in front of everybody so I can lift again everybody in the room and all the good we're trying to do. It's an important part of what I do. And I got to say, communication is easy. And it doesn't sound easy. I'm going to tell you why it's easy. I gave you a kind of a hack to waterproofing earlier. I mean, it's overly simplified. I get smacked by a lot of waterproofing experts in the country, but it really was an eye-opening moment for me when I said 30 years ago, oh my God, everything above must overlap everything below. Man, I've gone to court against experienced seasoned consultants that are telling me why their contract did it one way. And then I just go up with a photo and go, oh, looks like that's not overlapped right there. And, it's like in UN, it's simple. Everything above overlaps everything below. You can solve any leak with that logic. Well, communication is simple too. I'm going to give you 3 rules of communication. I'm going to spend more time on the last one. I'm going to tell you what they are right now. Every time you communicate, you want to communicate in a neuro way. In marketing, we call it neuromarketing. Neuromarketing basically says this: it's bullshit to assume, pardon my language, I'm just trying to be heard. It's bullshit to assume that people can follow all this data, blah, 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 blah. You got to give it to them in something that can they can understand in a tenth of a second, like a children's child smiling, or like one of those pictures you saw earlier. All of those pictures have an instant feeling to them. That's why they were given to this. And we have thousands of those pictures. So we understand that everything is neuro. You must give that instant response or people's bodies are going to tune you out. And I can speak more to that later. The other one is the language of inclusivity. It's really critical that you guys pick this up. Now, maybe some of you already know this. I didn't really discover this until the last 10 years of my life. And that is this rule: whenever you communicate in every way, only use positive words. So I'll give you a story what that means. When I met my wife, and I have a very positive wife, Bill's met her, Dawn, she's an amazing woman. And she just has this, she's almost so positive at first. How could this person be that positive? Dawn said to me, everything happens for a reason. She's always said that. She said it to me when I first met her like 13 years ago. And I said, oh yeah, I always say the same thing. Nothing happens by accident. And she said, that's not the same. Oh, yes, it is. And to me, it was at one time, but it's not. I'm going to tell you the reason why. We might get more back to this reptilian brain thing. But when I push my language of everything, nothing happens by accident, you think cognitively, you hear a logical statement. But your reptilian brain that doesn't really communicate with your logical cognitive brain, it's hearing nothing, accident. And so all it does is further push you away from trust with that person, because our brains, this animal brain was developed from us living on the plains 10,000 years ago. So what I'm saying is always use a language of inclusivity. Always say everything in positive words in all of your messaging and all of your marketing and in all of your talking. Tell stories on what's working. Don't tell the stories on what's not working. It's really tempting to do that. Oh man, I have nothing but pain associated with me trying to tell people what's not working. So tell stories of what's working. The language of inclusive. The last thing I want to say is story. And story is something, it's the moldy mattress. And I want to tell you guys something. If you guys were listening to me, and probably you were, you had a chemical experience in your body, because all of you have smelt mold before. When I told that story, and when I went into the deep, dark cave in that story, when I talked about going into that child's room, and it's hitting me more now than it did when I told it, you felt that and you smelt the mold. If you have a brain scan on your brain, the same time I'm telling that story, when it's striking emotion in me, it's striking emotion in you because you smelt that mold as if you were in the room with me all those years ago. And you need to understand the power of story. We think, again, our brains hear things, we think we make decisions cognitively, but it's all really made with the reptilian brain, who hears things only in story. I'm going to talk a little bit more about something I mentioned earlier, which was this, well, let me just try to say it this way. If people know why you exist in the world, you know, like I said, your tag, your Clemson badge, that'll be on some of your clothing, your hat, your t-shirt, it's going to create a sense of trust, because it shows you're part of a tribe, and we're tribal people by our animal brain, our decision brain. But when you can put cause to this, and I'm going to get, when you can put cause to this through story, it's understood in a big way. It's understood in a much bigger way. It's like this: when people heard my story and they know that we donate roofs to Habitat for Humanity, this is kind of like, it's kind of weird that I'm talking about what I just said, but I want you guys to understand this. But you guys have an unusual amount of trust for me, more than you normally would have. And this is why I want to explain what happened inside your brain. Your brain has decided, it's almost like if you were on the plains with me 10,000 years ago, we were traveling nomadically across the land. It's almost like I had a tattoo on my forehead that had the symbolisms of the stick figure family that says, this guy's safe to travel with, because he believes that everyone deserves a decent place to live. Or if you identify with the Ronald McDonald House thing that we're going to talk about next, why we donate roofs, and about that I had sick kids once and I needed to get involved with Ronald McDonald House, then it's as if I have a tattoo on my forehead 10,000 years ago that says this, which most people that I love believe. It is unimaginable to ignore sick children. When you can tell your story and your vulnerabilities there, what really happened in your life, then it creates a trust that's really big and genuine. I hear of cryptocurrency, and now it's becoming a big thing. And I know people, nonprofits are starting to, I still can't understand it, but I can understand this currency of social good that we express through the story. I'm gonna say one more thing on this about story. Recently we were given, I was given a really nice local kind of I don't know what it was. They called me like a philanthropist of a year or something. Now, philanthropist generally means a billionaire who's giving away half of his money. I'm just a struggling entrepreneur, but I have a generous model. But what I'm going to tell you the story is, and it's again, I'm not bragging, I'm telling you the difference, is because I understand communication, I knew how to communicate. The magazine said, Charles, and to these 4 other people that give way more than I do, they said, tell us a story, or they didn't say tell stories, tell us about what your favorite thing to give in and tell us why you give. And I knew what people would do because we don't understand this. Most of them are older. They started listing all the stuff they've done. It's completely impossible to remember all the stuff they did. When they asked, why do I give? I say, I give because it awakens me. I said, like the first thing I ever remember where something like mattered, I was in an orphanage in Thailand. And I didn't want to be there, but I was sent to a room and it was hot and it was sweaty. And this girl raised up her arms and I knew I had to pick her up. And then when I did, I was suddenly shocked because I thought she would weigh 30 or 40 pounds and she only weighed about 12 pounds because she had curvature of the spine. And I told her how I wanted to set her down, but how she dug her fingernails in my back and how something stirred in me, like almost like grandma who used to cook on a wood stove and stir with this big wooden stick. It's almost like grandma was stirring something up inside me and how that changed my life. And however, since then, I don't want to do things unless I can make a big impact. And then I told a story that we're going to tell you next. And I was heard. I was heard, not because what I did was more important. It's because I'm in tune with how to be heard and what matters in the world today. It used to be in the world, we could just tell people what to do in a top-down authority, and it worked. It actually, my style of leadership was recommended against 10 years ago. But right now, to communicate, you have to tell your real stories. You have to show vulnerability. Vulnerability is the most critical thing to show today because nobody completely trusts people because the opinions in people's positions, what people call themselves and what they call people across the aisle is so far off. So you really need your true story to show up, to be able to be heard and trusted inside and outside your company. But I don't have much passion about it.
Thank you. We're going to move on. We're getting close to the end of our presentations, but we have 2 stories we want to tell you because we think that they demonstrate leadership in a number of different ways, and they're true stories, even better, and they both have some kind of different morals to them. So I get to tell the first one, and the first one began in the middle of September in 2001. Anybody know what happened in September of 2001? You guys you weren't even born yet. It occurred to me, oh my God, that was such a moment for most of us, and you weren't probably even conceived yet. And anyway, September 11th, 2001, you know what happened. So on September, that was a Tuesday. So on September 17th, the next Monday, I get a phone call. I'm working at the National Roofing Contractors Association. I get a phone call from a member of ours who's in Northern Virginia Roofing Company. Never met the man, don't know him. He's a good dues paying member. We have a lot of those that are not active in the organization. And he says, my wife and I have been talking over the weekend, and we think the roofing industry needs to do something in response to the 9/11 attacks. And our idea is we should give the roof back to the Pentagon, the part that got destroyed. And I said something like, that's a wonderful idea. I have no idea how or if we can do that, but let me see what I can find out. So it turns out that we have a category of membership at the association called industrial institutional members. And these are for facility managers, basically. And one of those was a guy who worked at the Pentagon. Just by some quirk, we found that out. Didn't know him. called him up that Monday, the 17th. And I said, this is really odd, but I want to explore the possibility of donating the roof that got destroyed. And, what do you think of that idea? And he said, I think it's a wonderful idea. I can get you a meeting, but I don't know beyond that, kind of you're on your own. I don't know what's going to come of it. So now I'm communicating with my board of directors about this idea, and I want to move forward with it and at least find out about it. They encouraged me to move forward with it, but I'm hearing a lot of skepticism. Why would we want to give money to the federal government? All that, they take enough money from us. Why would we want to give them money? That kind of thing. But I decided to go ahead. And if you remember, you don't remember, but I will tell you, in the 2 or 3 weeks after 9/11, all the airports in Washington, D.C. were closed, or both of the airports in Washington, D.C. were closed. And the airport, even in Chicago where I was under intense security. It took, literally an hour to walk through a security line. Didn't have TSA lines then. You'd walk up to the gate, but they put in screening devices at the gate. So it was complicated to travel. So the first flight I could get on, getting anywhere near DC, was to fly to Baltimore on about September 18th or 19th. They had just opened up BWI. It's about an hour to DC. So I fly to BWI, me and 5 other people on that flight. As we're approaching the airport, the captain comes on and says, I don't want to alarm anybody, but if you're sitting on the right-hand side of the airplane, you might want to take a look out your window, because we have some friends out there who are going to help us into the airport. And there were F-16s escorting this plane, and we were one of the first flights into the East Coast after 9/11. Everybody's in first class, by the way. It was kind of cool, but and I felt it was probably the safest time to fly ever, because there's so much security out there. So anyway, they told me at the Pentagon, you have an hour window to show up on the metro, on the subway, at the Pentagon stop. And if you miss that hour window, we'll see you another day or another time, maybe, but that's your opportunity. So I was able to do that, drove down to DC and got on the metro, and I get there, and there's a guy to greet me who says, I'm your new best friend, I'm your security guy. I go everywhere you go. If you go to the bathroom, I go to the bathroom. You never leave my sight while you're in the building. You're under my control now, but we're going to the roof. So we go up on the roof, and there is a colonel who's in charge of the roof restoration. And now it's already started because they've got debris to remove, and they're putting out bids for the work and all that kind of stuff. And it's still an FBI crime scene because they haven't officially determined that it was a terrorist attack yet. So there's yellow tape everywhere, and there's FBI people everywhere. And I get up onto the roof, and I'm talking to this colonel who says to me, and I told her why we were there and what we were thinking about. And she says to me, finger in my face, if you get in my way, you're going to be my worst enemy, because I got budget approved on Monday. I'm going to get budget approved next Monday. I'm going to get this done by next September 11th, because that's our goal. So what do we have going on here? We have me trying to be an inspirational leader, trying to get the roof replaced, and we have her trying to be an inspirational leader because she knows she's got a project that she's got to get done. So a little bit of a conflict here. So what happened? I go back to our office thinking we're done. This is never going to happen. If I can't get the lead person on this project to go along with it, it'll never happen. However, I'm not quite ready to give up. And we have an office, NRCA had and has an office in Washington, D.C. I called the guy who heads that office, and I said, do you have any ideas about this? And he said, well, we have a good relationship with a congressman from Virginia who happens to be chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. House Armed Services Committee is responsible for the budget of the Department of Defense. So pretty good person to know. So so he calls their office and says, here's what we're trying to do. Anything you can do to help us with it would be appreciated, that kind of a thing. I'm back in Chicago, but we had arranged to have a follow-up meeting the next week. So the next week I fly back, go through the same exercise, security exercise, get back up on the roof. And now the colonel is my best friend. So happy to see you again. I'm sure we'll be able to get this all figured out. Let's go in. We have people waiting downstairs. Let's go into our conference room. I'm thinking I'm going to have 3 people. There are literally 25 people sitting around a conference table. Now we've got communication staff. We've got legal staff. We've got, you name it, all these people. And what had happened, we learned after the fact, is this congressman wrote a letter to Donald Rumsfeld, who was at the time the Secretary of Defense. Rumsfeld wrote a letter or talked to the people in charge of the reconstruction and basically said, I want you to work with these guys. They're trying to do a good thing. So now everybody's friend. So what can we do? How can we make this work? It's a long story, but we got it done. But what happened was this: after all of that, after we got through that big step, and by the way, I had another step to get over. My board of directors finally came around and agreed that this was a worthwhile thing to do. After that happened, there were new leaders emerging all over the place. There were people that got behind the project, embraced it, and wanted to be a part of it. I got phone calls that you can't believe from people I'd never met in my life saying, I gotta be there. You gotta let me be on that roof. I called people asking for donations of material, called a complete stranger at Home Depot, and I said, we need a lot of lumber because there's plywood underneath a lot of the roof that got destroyed. And this guy says, how much do you need and where should I send it? And I said, well, first of all, I think I need like $100,000 worth, and it's going to go, this contractor in Maryland. And I said, are you sure you want to do that? And he said, no, you didn't hear me. I said, tell me how much you need and where to send it. And boom, it was there. It showed up a week later, free, no charge. I had that kind of stuff happen all the time. So we had people taking on the project, taking on ownership of the project, and becoming leaders in their own way. And it was just an amazing thing to watch. We got it done. Got the roof done in June. We got Congress to issue a unanimous resolution, something they don't do anymore. They don't do anything unanimously in Congress anymore. And it all had a happy ending. And I would argue it was not so much my leadership for sure, but it was the way that this evolved by doing a good thing and telling a good story, how other leaders got created to kind of take it over and make sure it all happened. And Charles, I'm going to let you talk about Ronald McDonald House Charities and how that all came about too.
I'd love to, and you're a part of this story, so you probably have slightly different takes than me, and you're allowed to correct me. Bill and I have a beautiful story together that we're recognized nationally as being the co-initiators of a national partnership between the National Roofing Contractors Association Roofing Alliance and Ronald McDonald House, where we keep the kids safe, dry, and close from coast to coast. That's not an official thing that we're supposed to say, but I'll say it. I can say it as a CEO.
We can't, for legal reasons, say that, but that's another story.
But I can. Isn't it interesting? So, but it starts, I talked about a story that was really personal to my company earlier, how and why we donate all the Habitat roofs. That story has built us into who we are. However, there's another story that is bigger because it allows us to see ourselves bigger, and it's this story. And it really moves to the point that Bill made from the very first sentence: leadership is inspiring a group of people to get behind a specific cause. And not knowing this was going on, this is what happened. And this story starts about 8 years ago. And I was recently married, and my wife was pregnant and having a fantastic pregnancy, but she was pregnant with twins. And my wife was about 110 pounds before she got pregnant. And now her belly, I don't know what she weighed. We didn't discuss that, but her belly was like this wide. And honestly, it was just weird. It's like, oh my God, we go on a baby moon, which is like this. If you don't know what it is, it's what people do sometimes a month before the last little trip together. We come back from the baby moon and she's not feeling well. We call the doctor. They do some kind of test. And then he goes, she's got to come in immediately. The babies need to be removed now. And we're like, whoa, what's going on? And then suddenly a happy pregnancy went to fear And I'm looking up this word preeclampsia and seeing what it is, this condition she has. And so next thing I know, we're in the hospital and we go into a room, and it's about the same size as this recording studio, but it's an operating room, and there's 4 doctors. There's one for Dawn, and there's one for our 2 twins who are named Charlie and Gracie. We already named them, but they're coming out more than a month early. There's also a doctor in there for me because it was pretty traumatic watching this happen, because I watched my babies come out of my wife, born cesarean without making a sound. And I was used to seeing babies born. I have older kids that made noise, and I just didn't know what was happening. And this sudden pregnancy went into this condition. The kids are rushed up to NICU and the children's hospital. And next thing you know, Dawn and I we're waiting to see them, and we can't see them right away. And so we go to see them finally in the NICU the next day, and they are not, they're tiny. They weigh 3 and 4 pounds, and they have tubes going into all their orifices. And this is really my introduction to Ronald McDonald House. And it was this: I go in because the CHOC nurses, the Children's Hospital of Orange County nurses, said, Charles and Dawn, my wife's name, there's something that we've learned, and it's really important you understand. When children are born premature, that if their parents can come in and take off their shirts and lay their children skin on their naked chest for 2 hours twice a day, it'll more than double their chances of having 100% recovery and healing from this. And so, we were in there every day taking off, and it was like a half an hour drive to the hospital, 2 hours there, back home. Later in the afternoon, half an hour drive to the hospital. We didn't talk much. Suddenly our happy pregnancy was this condition. And doing that every day, I would see Ronald McDonald House, because Ronald McDonald House was there right next to the CHOC NICU, and they had beds, they had computers, they had food and coffee, and they'd say, hey, we're going to keep you close so your kids can heal. Come spend the night here. Come do this. And you know what I did? And this is my honest where I was at. I did not want to be there. I wanted my son home. I did not want to mingle with these people, and I ignored the Ronald McDonald House people. I ignored them. But one day I walked in, and I was late for my skin on skin with Charlie. It was going to be Charlie that day. And I was late, but I was stressed because I wasn't going to be able to do it because I had heartburn. I had chronic heartburn so bad, like I wasn't going to be able to lay down, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But on the way in, there was no Ronald McDonald House station attendant there that day. And I looked down and I saw that, you've seen it before, a green Nature Valley granola bar. And in my mind, that might help. And I just remember taking it. I say take it. I took it because I didn't have any intention of paying anybody back. But my next memory that day, I only have one more memory that day, and it's about an hour and a half later. I just remember being in NICU on that gurney with my shirt off and Charlie asleep on my chest, and I had no heartburn. And that's when I started to get what Ronald McDonald House was. Now that's my real story. That story started happening about the time I met Bill. And Bill, he came to one of my big habitat builds inside one of these, the same hangar they shot the first Austin Powers movie in. And they were building like 7 homes. We were framing the walls of 7 homes inside a big airport hangar. And, and he's like, man, what can we do for the roofing industry? And I had all these ideas of what we could do. But in the meantime, I was starting to donate roofing services on Ronald McDonald House, Orange County. And the reason I did is the lady, Susan Kinney, who's a good friend of Bill now, Susan Kinney came in and told me they had some roof maintenance or might have a leak. And so I said, well, we can do that. In fact, I like that. We'll keep them safe and dry. We can keep the families dry here. And so that kind of worked for me. So when Bill came to me, I already wasted a couple ideas on him that he very accurately explained to me wouldn't work. And then I always remember what Bill said when I said, Bill, I'm taking care of the roofs here. And you know what? This is a doable. There's 165 of these in the US. And what if we could provide all of the services on all the houses? And I just remember there was a pause. And for the first time, I heard Bill, as if he was nodding, and he said, this may work. That's what you said, Bill. He said, this may work. And I remember I got such a hope out of that. I got so excited. And it seemed like it took forever. And Bill says I called all the time, bugging him and the Ronald McDonald House people. But what's really cool is we ended up having that impact. And Bill was able to sell this to the entire membership of the Roofing Alliance. And I remember at a board meeting down in San Diego, when Bill pitched this along with Sarah Toback from Ronald McDonald House Charities. And I remember watching all these big, you've seen the guys at the shows, these big burly rippers. There's a lot of big burly rippers, not all of us. Some of us are female and some of us are small, but all these big tough guys wiping the tears out of their eyes, nobody in seeing, and unanimously voting to make Ronald McDonald House Charities their first ever nonprofit partner, where to this day now we're able to keep the family safe and dry. And Bill's the one that still really makes that work. And that has been a fantastic story. And because it's my real story, I didn't, you know what? I got to be honest with you. That granola bar story was such a wimpy story in my mind. It is. I don't know why it works. When I went to my first board meeting, when I was asked to be on the board of Ronald McDonald House, Orange County, I only told that story. That was the first time I told it there. I only told it because I felt to them, they needed to know why I was there and I had to qualify. Well, I do have a touch. My kids are healthy and I didn't take much, but I took a granola bar. You know, it's like today, that's a powerful story. And it's my real story. So I remember when I was talking when Bill was up there selling it, he's the one that did all the work. But when I told my story, I told that real story, not knowing it has impact, but it does looking back now because it's my real story. And it's really unquestionable, my real story. Nobody will question it. My first story I told the general body of the roofing industry was another story, I might not be believed unanimously, but I told a real life story. And your body has all sorts of tells whether your animal brain's whether going to believe your cognitive brain. You'll think you like me or not like me, but it's really what your animal brain does. And it's my real story that builds the trust. It's the real story that allows Bill to sell it. But Bill will tell you he didn't have much difficulty selling this anyway, because everybody like me has family, kids that have been sick. And we, like most people you love, think it's unimaginable to ignore sick people. So I'll let you kind of polish off that story and push it where you think, Bill.
Well, I'll tell you, to me, the end of the story is the way that we did this was we identified contractors where every house is. There are 165 Ronald McDonald houses in the country. There's a few more that are in hospitals. We decided we're not going to take care of the roofs of all the hospitals that they're in, but we'll take care of the roofs of the freestanding houses. By the way, we can't legally say we keep them safe because the Ronald McDonald House Charities said to me, well, you can't guarantee that our houses are going to be safe. And all right, we can keep them dry. Yeah, that's all right. We can keep them dry. Anyway, so 165 of them. So we identified the 165 contractors who we wanted to, we called it adopt the roof. And that was the way that we went out. And the deal was the contractor would do an initial inspection, take care of any problems that he saw, agree to do annual maintenance, a couple visits a year, take care of any minor repairs. And then if we had found bigger repairs were needed, or if there's a re-roof or an expansion or a new house, and there seemed to be a lot of those still going on, we told the houses that in those cases we can't guarantee them a free roof, but we could guarantee them a good roof that would be cheaper than what they would pay in the marketplace, because we can almost always get material. And the end point for me is this. I've in the course of the couple of years it took to put that all in place, I had exactly one person say no. And I probably talked to 200 contractors, manufacturers, distributors, people in the roofing industry. And the only one who said no was a manufacturer, and it had to do with supply issues. They were low on inventory on the product that we wanted. They've helped in other houses, but I used to be able to say nobody's ever said no, but the honest answer is one. But that's the only one. And even in the last year, when materials are hard to come by, nobody said no. They've figured out a way to get the material donated to the houses that need them. So to me, it's a wonderful story. We did it in part to change the brand of the roofing industry. Roofing industry doesn't have the best brand of industries, and now we're hearing people. I'm hearing people anyway say, oh, you're the guys that do the houses on the Ronald McDonald House in our town, in our neighborhood, whatever it may be. And that's powerful stuff, I would tell you. Before we conclude here, any questions about any of this for Charles in particular?
While you're taking that question, I just want to quickly say, Bill, that this process is so good for everybody, but like, one of the things at the same time all this is going on, you also came to me and said, join the Roofing Alliance. And there was a caveat to that. That is, you need to pay $50,000, donate $50,000 that we can use it and grow. And I looked at Bill and said, I can't. That's too much money. I'm local, and looking back now, I saw myself so much smaller on what I could do and what our impact. And I really learned that mindset is critical. And Bill really helped shifted my mindset. Bill helps me to see myself more powerful and all of the employees of my company is more powerful. And I think that's the concept that I, as a leader, as Bill does, need to always do for other people. And one of the things I want to make sure you, before you start asking questions, I want to talk to that. A couple of points that you could do that would allow you to slot in your life more genuinely, awesomely who you were meant to be. And I would like to speak to that for a second before we get out of here. That's the only reason I want to plug that before we go on to questions. Thanks.
And you notice the photo here. Charles didn't tell you, but he led the capital campaign for the Ronald McDonald House in Irvine, California, which needed $12 million to do their expansion, and his committee raised 13.
We hit 13.9 million yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, even better.
Yeah.
So here we are at Camp Ronald McDonald for Good Times. They have a bunch of cabins here. This is a place where they take kids from the houses in Southern California. They take them up there for a week. With parents are not allowed. Parents cannot visit. They have to drop them off and leave. They have medical staff up there and all of that. They have a bunch of cabins, all of which were built, I think, in the 1930s or something, all of which probably had roofs that were built in the 1930s. So we were able to, thanks to Charles again, able to get a couple of his competitors to work with him. We got a distributor, a manufacturer to donate materials, and got all those roofs taken care of. And by the way, the statistic, Charles, on this is that something like these kids go up there for a week and they get to be kids again after being sick. And the statistic is something horrible, like only 20% of them actually survive very, very much longer. So it's a really, really important thing that they do there. And one of his competitors, Shell Roof Solutions in Southern California, and that's been amazing to watch too. We've been able to get friendly competitors, and in some cases not so friendly competitors, to work together on this stuff.
And once they in roofing until I met you, Bill. Yeah.
And what's really cool about it is they get to like each other. It's like, I know I compete against you, but it doesn't make you a bad person when that might have been what you thought before. All right, we're about out of our time, so be happy to take any questions if anybody has any. How about a round of applause for Charles?
Can I speak to? First of all, Bill, I just have to say, I brought this button, and this is for you. I don't know if you can see it. And this is from a book Jen Sincero wrote, which I highly recommend. It's a little mind shift book to see yourself more powerful. But I'm going to press this for you. Listen.
You are a badass.
You are a badass, sir. But I want to mention two things. I think the most important thing that you guys can do, and I just got to tell you this, is to really know yourself. You can't be who you are. You can't express your story unless you know yourself. And so I'm gonna ask you guys a question right now. And this is you may or may not have taken a DISC personality assessment in the past. A DISC personality assessment is an assessment that tells you how you will fit into the workplace, but it's also a great tool for how to get more out of communication in life. So you need to know yourself. So anytime you get a chance to find out about yourself, an EQ test, every one of these tests are like 20 minutes, multiple choice, easy to take, but it gives you another view of yourself. And you go, oh, well, I'll be danged, I may be that way. And I'm going to answer like this. I want you to imagine right now, answer the question, which most sounds like you? You're an animal trying to survive in the world. You can either be a lion, a cocker spaniel, a gazelle, or a fox. Somebody raise their hand and tell me which animal is most like you.
Okay, a gazelle.
A
Okay.
gazelle.
A gazelle.
We have one gazelle.
Okay. I like that. And you're probably right. And now I'm going to give you a little more description. Does your natural style need to be in control? Like you imagine a lion would be? Do you need everyone in the room to like you? Do you need to be popular? Are you a cocker spaniel? Are you in the middle of the pack supporting everybody like a gazelle? Or are you only traveling at dawn because you're sly and cautious like a fox? Now, do you still think you're a gazelle?
No, I like to have control of my situation.
Who are you now?
Fine.
The lion. Okay. I believe you with that look. So by the way, the most common trait is gazelle. I have a gazelle and everybody has like two of these. Now I'm going to tell you this is a disc. I'm lining up this disc is if you're a D on a disc scale, you're dominant. If you're an I on a disc scale, you need to be popular. If you're an S, you're in the middle of the pack. If you're a C, you're cautious. But what this does, when you do an assessment in any type of assessment, this is what happened to me. My whole life, I've been loud in a room. I've said things. I've got beat up in high school. Sometimes I made people laugh, but it's like, God, why did I say that out loud? And then one time I was in a meeting like this, and we were all taking this DISC assessment, and then the DISC assessment said, Charles is a high I. He wants everyone to like him. And somebody said that out loud, Charles, you want everyone to like you. And I said, no, I don't. And then I sat on that for the next hour. And I realized I do. And wait a minute, I knew it anyway, but I can forgive myself. I'm designed that way. I'm built that way. Now I can learn how to leverage that better. And I learned what I'm not and what I am. And so the reason you want to do assessments, it's going to help you discover who you really are. So you're not living up to your mom and dad's expectations or your religion or your culture expectations. You're living up partially through that, but through who you really are. To do that, take assessments every time you can get them. And as students, you can get them for free a lot. The next thing I want you to do, this is the last thing I'm going to preach to you on, I swear. But in the morning when you get up, this is called the 5-minute journal. I've given out 1,000 of these. I have so many great stories on what's done for people and what it's done for me. It's just a simple tool. And it says this: every morning when I get up, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to do 3 things. And it's going to take me only 5 minutes. So it's not much of a commitment. I'm going to write down 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things that'll make the day great, and 2 I ams. A quick explanation. Anybody will tell you who's ever done a gratitude list makes you feel better. So don't do it at the end of the day so you sleep good. Do it so you have a great day. Then you'll sleep good at night. So do a gratitude list, 3 things, quick. I'm grateful that I'm healthy. I'm grateful that I get to go speak at Clemson today. I'm grateful I have a happy culture. What will make the day great? And I write things like, and it always comes to pass, I'm going to lift everyone I touch in wakes and in ripples that will last forever. I mean, why not write that down? And what I find is when I set my intention for the day, OMG, you are going to discover the magical powers you have away from expectations of other people. And you'll be able to recognize it as truly you. It's your inspiration and seeing yourself higher. So what I'm saying here is you work on yourself. If you spend a little bit of time, look at it this way. My first half an hour, at least every morning, is F everybody else. It's about me. If I'm not happy for the day, how can I set it right for everyone else? So it's about being inspired, finding that balance. Me, I take a walk and notice nature, whatever I'm going to, then I can bask in every moment. for the rest of the day. And it's not showing up prepared with what I'm going to say, which I didn't today. I'll be honest with you. It's showing up prepared for how I'm going to occur. And that's how this type of preparation can help you exceed and excel in the world we're moving into, where things are going to shift a lot faster than they did for the world of your parents.
All right, thanks, Charles. We are, I think, Deval, I think we're going to take a break here.
Yeah, we'll take a break for 10 minutes, and then Mr. Bill will be here. So feel free to talk with him as always. Charles, can you hear me at all a little bit?
Yeah, I can hear you. And you look really handsome today, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No one said that in a while, including my wife, so I appreciate you.
This
saying
one's
that.
for
Thank
you,
you again,
Deval. I
Charles.
don't remember what the next, let's see what it says.
You can do it.
Okay.
There we go. I can do it. I can do it. Charles, thank you again. It's always a pleasure seeing you and talking to you. You are really inspirational. Thank you again for being here. And
any of you ever in Southern California, come by. We have gifts for you.
please do. Thank you, Charles, again. I appreciate your time. I know
Will,
you're
thank
busy.
you. Thanks,
See ya.
all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo. Was that 2 hours?
All right, I'm gonna, I think that's all for the online students. So I'm gonna end the call. And no, actually, okay, let's talk quickly about the exam since I have the online students here. Okay, and then we'll take a break. Okay. So exam. So first off, we'll not be meeting in class next week for Thursday. Okay, so the exam will be available on Canvas. It'll be online. The way that it's going to be set up is it's going to have two parts. The first part is going to be multiple choice questions. There'll be about 10 to 15 multiple choice questions. And then the second part is going to be short answers, anywhere between 3 to 4. Okay, you'll have about 35 minutes for the multiple choice questions, a 2-minute per question. And then you'll have about 20 minutes for the short answer. So your total exam is going to be anywhere between an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes. The nice thing about this exam is, you don't have to take those two in one sitting. You can take one, you'll be done with it, and then you can take the next one later on. Okay, does that make sense? Now, as far as the content of the exam, so this is a hint. Okay, this is not what I'm saying is going to come. The hint is, most of the multiple choice questions will be focused on from the lectures in 1 and 2 and 3 a little bit that we covered. Does that make sense? So some of the multiple choice questions might be, the different types of roofing systems. You guys know Mr. Rick who came and spoke that first week. You guys have a PowerPoint, and I think I covered after that what you need to know, right? You guys don't need to know everything that Mr. Rick knew at the time because he's done this for a while. But some of the things that you should know for that exam on multiple choice is, basically, what are the different types of roofing systems, right? We know that. Low slope, okay, we haven't covered a steep slope yet. Then you should know, what are the different groups of roofing systems, the slope requirements, just basics about the roofing, okay? And then a little bit about the difference between general contracting and roofing contracting. That could be a fair question for a multiple choice, okay? And then some of the things that we have heard in the last 2 weeks, I cannot give you multiple choice on that because there's no right or wrong answer. But what I would expect you to do is kind of take everything you have learned and heard, and be able to kind of apply it and critical think and answer those questions accordingly. Does that make sense? It'll be on leadership. It'll be on, core values. It'll be on, sustaining roofing business. So those will be more so of the open-ended questions on that topic. Does that help? Okay. This is as close as I can get without telling you what's on the exam. Okay? All right, did you enjoy that today? Awesome. So now, before I let the online students go, when we take a break, couple more things. So after exam 1, we are going to transition back to the roofing world, more so on the field level. Okay? So now we're going to get into, so we cover different types of roofing systems, and we went to the more business aspects and construction management aspects. And after midterm exam, we're going to come back to more the field level. I'm going to give you guys the more in-depth knowledge about, I think we talked about a little bit of safety, maintenance, roofing systems, how they're put together. So I'll do a lecture on that, so you have a base ground on that, because we didn't cover that specifically in this class. But then we're also going to bring in manufacturers. You'll see the entire process of material distribution, the material process, how it's distributed, how do they travel, where do they go, what's the process of getting it to the job site. So we'll turn back and go back to the more so field level. Does that make sense? So we're going in a circle. I like going in circles. Good? Okay. One last thing, I promise. See, I'm Charles now, right? No, I'm just kidding. One last thing, semester project. Your semester project will be posted in the next week, and you'll have about 5 weeks to finish that semester project. You can do it in groups. Now, there will be 2 different projects, one for undergraduate, one for graduates. You're more than welcome to pick anyone you want on your team, a max of 4. Okay? And you can even, collaborate with online students if you wanted to. Online students, if you don't want to collaborate with these guys, I'm okay with that, but just find at least 4, okay? 3 other people that like you. Does that make sense? So be looking out for that. It's going to be everything that we learn, really basically applying it. For undergraduates, it's going to be a fun project. For graduates, it's going to be a stressful project. So fun and stressful, that's what you get, undergraduate, graduate, right? So good? A lot of things coming up, okay? Oh yeah, great question. So the exam will be available on Thursday from morning 6 a.m. to midnight. And if you guys are busy from 6 a.m. to midnight, wow. Even I'm not that busy, okay? So I think everyone, even online students, should have time to go and log on to Canvas and take the exam, okay? Make sense? Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute break. And I'm going to release the online students. Let me know if you have any questions.